Hello everyone, welcome to this first ever game for Death Among the Stars. Today we are going to be playing a beachhead scenario. You'll know this one if you've ever seen the Age of Alchemy battle reports. It's trying to be within 8 inches of the centre of the table. Now the two forces that we're actually going to have playing off against each other today are the Zeta Mining Corporation over here, and then the experiments of the Roving Gene-Engineers on this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the camera in and we're going to show you each of the two groups that we have today. For the Zeta Mining Corporation, we have two heavy gunners with energy big bore cannons. We have a comms operator who has an energy rifle. Actually, no, it's an energy carbine now I think about it. It's an energy carbine. We have a grenadier who has chemical grenades. We have two ex-soldiers who also have energy carbines. And then we have two jet troopers who have energy pistols, have a pair of energy pistols each. As for the Roving Gene-Engineers, today we have two duelists with a combat knife has been bought for them. Two death dancers, combat knives have also been bought for them. Two assassins, again, combat knives have been bought for them. And gang member with a chemical launcher. And then on the end here we have two phase shifters who have energy pistols but have not had a combat knife bought for them. To give you a quick example of how the weapon system works in Death Among the Stars, I have put one of the energy big bore cannons up here, which is the heavy gunner from the Zeta Mining Corporation. The way it works in this is that the weapon is made up of the names that denote what it does. So as it's an energy weapon, it's a -1 to my opponent's armor rolls. We'll see those later in the game. As it's big bore, it has a potential chance to do more wounds rather than just one for every one my opponent takes. And because it's a cannon, it is hard to move and then fire with it. Again, these are all rules that we will see in play as we go through the game. And as we can see, that is both sides now deployed. We have gone for a face-off deployment type. That is where we choose a side each at the beginning and then deploy our models within 6 inches of that side. So in this case, I've gone for quite a fairly sort of spread out front line. My opponent has also gone reasonably for the same. So we're going to try and go, because this is a central objective one, to try and go and grab that central objective. At the start of the game, we also do actually need to pick a leader for our side. Now in this case, I am going to pick the comms operator over here. As for my opponent, their leader is going to be that phase shifter there with the more hood-like face rather than the helmeted face of the other one. So we're both sides deployed. That is us ready to go. We are going to begin this beachhead scenario and show you how games of Death Among the Stars are actually played. So with games of Death Among the Stars, instead of it being rolling off to decide who goes first at the start of each turn, it's actually done based on a counter per model system. Now in this jar here, we can see that I've got a selection of purple and orange counters. Now the orange counters number 9, which means they are going to be for the Roving Gene-Engineers, and the purple 8 ones that are in here are going to be for the ZMC, the Zeta Mining Corporation. Now how this game works is I'm going to draw one of these out, without looking of course. It's an orange one, so what I do is I hand that over to my opponent because they're playing the force that matches the colour, and they now get to action one of their models. We will come back and show you once they've decided which one. So with my opponent's decision made, they have picked this phase shifter over here. Now they would normally move 7, but because they are Roving Gene-Engineer with speed, they actually get to move 8 per move, and you get given 2 actions. So my opponent has decided they're going to move them with 1 move action, which will bring them to about here, and then they're going to use the other move action again, which would bring them to just inside here. And while they're there, they'll also put the token next to them so we know that that model has activated. However, the phase shifter, every time they move, because they jump through reality and appear in a new location, has to roll a dice. For any ones that my opponent rolls, they will take a strike. Now a strike is like wounds, and each model has so many it can take before it is removed. So my opponent has rolled, thankfully, 2 2s in their case, so this model takes no damage at all. So my opponent's next option, for next token they're going to actually activate the other phase shifter, and we have worked out that with their ability to do the jumping around sort of with the phase shifting ability, they can end up all the way in here, just placed on the floor. 1 second, I will place them just there. And my opponent's going to place their token next to them. So that is the phase shifter activated, but my opponent now has to roll 2 dice. And for each 1 they get, they will take a strike. And they've taken no strikes. Next token was me, and I'm going to move this Grenadier here. And he's going to use a double move, so a move and a move again. And it's going to pop him over here, just sort of in the corner by this building. Next token is my one, and I'm going to have this model here move first of all, which will be to about there. Now, what I'm then going to do is I'm going to trace a line. I'm going to declare that my second action is shooting, and it's going to be this model here, which is within the 24-inch range of my energy carbine. The way that shooting works is you have an accuracy modifier. You have an accuracy, which is the model's own skill at shooting. Then you have modifiers based on a variety of things that it has done. Now, in this case, my model starts at 3. However, they have moved, which makes it a 4, so they performed a move action before. They are at more than half the weapon's range, because they're above 12 inches of the half range of 24, and they're shooting through heavy cover here, or hard cover here, so it's an additional -2. Now that takes my 3 with a -4 penalty. It actually takes it to 7s, but in this game, unlike in Age of Alchemy, you can hit on 7s. The way this works is I roll the dice for the weapon, which is 3 for the number of shots it has. Now, because I've rolled a 6, oops, mashing things around here. Because I've rolled a 6, I can actually re-roll that, and if I, as I have done there, if I roll a 1, that would be a 7 and that would miss. The easiest way to think about it is when you need to roll on 7s, 8s, 9s or 10s, you essentially need to roll that the first dice is a 6 and the second dice would beat that number. So if I was to roll a 1 there, with the 6 I previously rolled, it would be a 7 and thus a fail. Here, it's more. So I have actually got a hit. A very lucky hit, but I've got a hit. Now what my opponent does is takes an armor roll. Now their armor is 5, so they need to roll a 5 or 6, but my weapon is energy, so it's a -1 to this dice. So they're actually looking at a 6 only. No, they haven't rolled a 6. So in this case, my opponent takes a strike, which they add on like so, and that is one of this model in this case has 4, so that model now has 3 strikes remaining before it is removed from play. So my opponent is going to actually have their duelist, who just took a wound there. They're going to do a double move, and that will get them from here all the way over, with their 14 inches in total, to here. So with my opponent's next action, they're going to activate this Death Dancer over here. Now, they normally have a 9-inch move, which gets +1 for being +1 for their army rule, special rule, and on top of that, they're going to do a double move. So they go a whopping 20 inches of movement, which does mean that they're going to go from here. My opponent's already worked it out that they want to go all the way over to here. So the next token is mine, and it's going on my comms operator, who is going to move around his friend like so. Now, oh no, hang on, tell a lie, he's going to move like so. Now, he is able to get a shot on my opponent's model here. However, he is a 3 normally, he has moved, and it is hard cover, but it isn't long range because it's within 12. So I'm going to be hitting here on 6s with this energy carbine. Ooh, okay, so I get 2 hits on my opponent. These would normally be 5s to save, but energy makes it -1. My opponent's looking for 6s. They get 1 6, so they only take a single wound, but that was a very surprising number of shots that hit there. With my next token, this guy here is going to move up his 5 inches, like so, and he is going to shoot the same target. Now, as we just saw there, given the distance and the movement and the cover, it would go to 6s to hit with this energy carbine. However, the comms operator's special rule is that any model that he successfully hits, if another friendly model in the same turn, who is within 3 of the comms operator, as this guy is, targets that model that was shot at, they get +1 to hit. So it's actually 5s to hit now, of which I get 1. So my opponent will need to make 1 armor roll looking for a 6. Ooh, it's close, but unfortunately it does put them on 2 wounds. For my next activation, this model here is going to use its paltry 4 inches movement twice. Now, because he's got to move and then go up a ladder and end up halfway through, we have actually allowed that there is a double move option so that you can essentially use both actions as moves and do it as one continuous movement. This means he can get to there. So my opponent has decided that their assassin here is going to be activated, and we've worked out that a double move will get them to just over here by moving either around their friends this way or that way. So my opponent's just going to pop them in there and then pop their token next to them on the box so we know which one it is. The next token drawn was mine, and I'm going to use it to activate this jet trooper who gets to go 3 inches here, but he doesn't treat vertical movement as double, he just treats it as the regular normal movement. So he's going to go up for 3, and then with his remaining 4 inches, because he moves surprisingly far, he is going to go to there. Now that's one action. With his second action, he's actually going to take a shot down at this phase shifter in here. With the jet trooper, they start with an accuracy of 3, which is then modified down by the fact that I have moved and my opponent is in hard cover. However, there is no range penalty because the pistols have a 12-inch range and I am within 6 inches. The only thing is, it starts at 3, so we have a move penalty, we have a hard cover penalty taking it down to a 6, but there is an inherent +1 accuracy in the pistols, taking them back up to a 5. On top of that, I am running 2 pistols with 2 shots each, and pistols can be used 2 at a time, so I'm going to get 4 shots hitting on 5s with an energy pistol into that phase shifter. So I've got 2 hits. My opponent now needs to roll. The phase shifter only has armor 5 as well. -1 for it being energy means it needs to be 6s to save. Ooh, my opponent's the phase shifter takes 2 wounds from that. Once again, the next token was mine. Now, this model here, this heavy gunner, is going to fire all the way over at this model here. Now, the range of the gun, it is definitely in long range, but it gets 4 shots. So this is the first round of shooting. Now, this one I've rolled here, because of the heavy gunner special rule, that if the first shot he makes is with, if the first action he makes is a fire action, I can re-roll 1s. And I've rolled it into a 5. However, even with that, the 5s are not enough because my opponent is getting hard cover and is at long range, so it would need to be 6s to hit. For my second action, I'm also going to shoot again at that model. However, because of the fact that I'm a 3 to hit normally, goes up to a 5 for the cover, 6 for the range, and now a 7 because I've already performed a fire action before it, means that I'll be hitting on 7s and there are no re-rolling 1s because that bonus only applies for the first fire action, if it is a fire action. So I don't roll any 6s to try and roll into 7s, and I can't re-roll these 2 1s. So my opponent has decided with this Death Dancer here, they're going to do another double move, and by going this way and snaking around, they can actually get to just here on the opposite side of this barrier to my Grenadier. Next token went to my opponent, and they're going to move this assassin, who is going to move double and move into there. I'll take that bridge away for a second. They're just going to plop themselves in there with their token. The last token for my side just came up, so I'm actually going to use it to move this guy here, and they're going to go, what they're going to do is jump in and around like so that they are in this bit of cover here. Now in this case here with my model, They are just within 6 inches. So we have a 3 to hit. It would be -1 for having performed a move action, +1 for being armed with pistol, or the accuracy inherent in pistols. So it would actually go back to 3s to hit, re-rolling 1s. I have 2 pistols, so it's 2 sets of shooting. Ooh, so I failed twice, but I do get 2 hits. My opponent now has 2 armor rolls at -1, so looking at 6s only to save. They get 1 6, so they only take a single wound. The last 2 tokens out were both my opponents, so they are going to activate, first of all, their gang member, who can go 3 inches up this ladder, and then from the top there, he would get himself to just there with his full move. So my opponent's going to move the dice up next to him. Okay, we know it's him who's been activated, we'll just put it there. Then next, my opponent is going to activate this model here, who is a duelist who gets to go 6 inches, so 7 inches with their armor special rule. And they're going to go up to those crates there and take their token with them. So with that, we have actually come to the end of the first turn. As we can see, every single model on the board currently has a token assigned to them and has performed 2 actions. What we're going to do is we're going to gather up all the tokens, and then we'll show you as we go into turn 2. So with that, we have come to the start of turn 2. As you can see, nobody has any tokens assigned. They're all back in the box, ready to go again. As the first token out the box was my opponent's, they're going to assign it to the Death Dancer, who is within an inch of this Grenadier, only just, but is within an inch. So they're going to declare an attack action against them. Now, the way an attack action works, my opponent, this model here, has a combat stat of 5. So my opponent picks up 5 dice, and they now roll them. What they're looking for here is 3 pluses. Now, they've rolled 3 2s, which would be misses, but the Death Dancer special rule is every time they initiate an attack action, they get to re-roll one of those failed dice. So my opponent has rolled into a success. So what we now do is we take my opponent got 3 successes. Now I would normally be armor 4. For each success they make, I need to make an armor roll. Normally before, the combat knife we bought them in the beginning makes it 5s. So I'm looking at 5s and 6s here. So I pass none of them, so I actually end up taking 3 wounds. There's a 2 and a 1 there. And now what happens is I get to attack back. Now, unfortunately, as you might guess, the Grenadier is not as good in combat as the Death Dancer, given it's their particular role. So what I only get 2 attacks back. Now, because it's me attacking back to a combat, I only get to roll 2 dice. And I only get to roll 2 dice because I only have a combat skill of 2, and I will only hit on 4s, 5s, or 6s. So I get 1 5, so my opponent owes me 1 armor roll, but this will be on their normal armor of 5 or 6, which they have failed just, so they go up to 2 strikes taken. And that is the end of the action. Now my opponent still, because they started in base contact, still has a second action, and they could decide they just want to attack again. With that, my opponent has decided they're actually going to use their second action as an attack action once again. So they're looking at rolling those same 5 dice, re-rolling one of the fails for the Death Dancer special rules, so they can pick up either that 1 or that 2. And that's a success. So I have to make, I'm going to reuse these dice, I have to make 4 armor rolls. So I have to make 4 armor rolls. I have failed 3, and that model only has 5 strikes, so they are removed from play. But more importantly, they are removed from play, and I take a token with them. Because the model hasn't already been given a token, I take one out the box and add it to them. If they had already been given a token, I would just take that one with them out of the game. However, because we were fighting over an obstacle, I do still get to make my 2 attacks back, hitting on 4s, 5s and 6s, which don't anyway, but it's important to make sure that I roll those dice. So my opponent has decided, given they got the next counter again, this model here is actually going to use its double move and go 20 inches all the way to this corner here, because they'd rather keep this model alive and fighting than just sacrificing it to 3 models over here that could just shoot it down. So next action, or next token, is for my opponent, and they're going to activate this model here. Now they've already decided they're going to run them into this corner here, like so. I'll just have them pop the token just there so he can see it. And then we'll go to drawing the next one. So I've finally got a token for myself, and with that, this heavy gunner up here is going to level their energy big bore cannon and fire at this gang member over here. Now, the way this works is I have 4 shots, there is no cover, and I haven't moved or performed any other actions, so I'm actually going to be hitting on 3s. On top of that, I'm going to be hitting on 3s, and I'm also going to be re-rolling 1s because it's my first action as a fire action. So, all of them have hit. Now, for each one of these, my opponent needs to roll a dice, so that's 4 dice. If they get a 6, they'll be okay. Anything else that they roll won't be so good because it will go through. Let's have a look. So my opponent has rolled 1 6, so they've negated 1 of my hits. However, I still have hit them 3 times. So the way that the big bore weapon works, or the rifle weapons work, is that whenever a model takes a strike from them, the person using the weapon rolls a d6. Now, if I roll a 1, 2, 3, my opponent takes 1 strike per 1. If I roll a 4, 5, 6, it doubles to 2 strikes. So here I could potentially do anywhere between 3 and 6 damage depending on what I roll. So okay, so that's these ones are worth 1 strike and these are worth 2. So I've done 4 strikes in total to my opponent. And unfortunately for me, this model here has 5 strikes, so I didn't cause enough. Oh, no, my opponent's already ready. However, the model might fall. Here's the thing. Now, my opponent has taken at least 1 strike within 1 inch of an edge, in this case, this one. So they need to roll 1 dice. If they roll a 1 or a 2, they will fall. Anything else, and they'll be fine. Ooh, so my opponent has rolled a 1 or a 2 and they fall. Now we discount the model who's down there, they'll just step out the way. So I've worked it out. We discount the model that is down here, but they will fall 3 inches. So my opponent now needs to roll 3 dice, 1 for each inch that they fall. And unless they get 1s and 2s on all of these, if any of these are a 3+, they'll take 1 strike and that's all they need to take them out of the game. Okay, so my opponent has unfortunately rolled 2 3s, each one of them is a strike, so that's this model removed. Because this model is not activated yet, as you can see, there's the model and there is a token for them. After that, quite devastating display as they normally tend to be, this model is going to use its second action to move a paltry 4 inches like so. So my opponent has decided, seeing as they got the next token, that this model is going to jump up like so using its phase shifter ability, and they can get there while still being able to fight. Now my opponent has, first of all, is going to roll a d6 for their phase shifting ability or reality shift to see if they get a 1. Ooh, they do, so they take a strike before we start, but they now get to roll 5 dice for their attacks and see what they get. Looking at 3s or more to cause a wound. Okay, so they've caused 4 wounds. Now, in my case, I have an armor of 4+. Now, this one doesn't have a combat knife, so there is no minuses to this. However, I do still fail 2. And on top of that, on a 1 or 2, I might fall. I don't in this case, so I'm okay. However, I do get to attack back, which will be a grand total of 2 attacks, hitting on 4s, 5s and 6s because I'm attacking back. I get 1, so my opponent owes me 1 armor roll, 5 or 6, which they don't pass, so they go up to having taken another strike. And that is both of my opponent's actions with that model. Next token that came up was again my opponent's, and they're going to have this phase shifter here, who we've worked out with the ability that they have, can actually get to just here, but that is within an inch of a model to make an attack action. Now they're going to roll to see if they take a wound, which they don't. Now they get to roll those 5 dice, and for each 3+, I might take a strike. Ooh, okay, so they've got 4. Again, I get to roll and see if I can pass any of these on my 4-up armor. Ooh, I fail 3, so I'm actually down. I'm down 3 wounds. And then I get to attack back with my grand total of 2 strikes. One of which hits attacking back. My opponent now rolls that on a 5 or 6 they ignore, which they don't, so they will take a single strike themselves. So with this model here, I'm going to use their Jet Trooper ability to jet themselves up like so, using the word jet so many times there. With the second action, I'm actually going to shoot down at this model here. Now they start off on 3s normally, however they both moved and were within 1 inch of an enemy model before they made any actions, so that's a -2 penalty in total for that. However, I get a +1 for the pistols, and I get an additional +1 because I'm within 4 inches or less of the model I'm shooting at, so I actually go back to hitting on 3s. It would have been 4s without the pistol bonus. So we're looking at 3s to hit here. That's all of them. That was great. My opponent, I'm currently -1 to their armor, so they're looking at a 6s here to save. Ooh, they saved 2 of them, so they do take 2 further strikes, and that is it for that model. The next token up is for my opponent, who is going to give it to this duelist here, and we've worked out that they're going to use a double move to come all the way through and into here, and into this corner here like so. So my opponent has decided with their next token, which was theirs, they're actually just going to activate this model here, but they're not going to do any actions. They're just going to essentially skip a turn. So the model's just going to kind of move an inch and move an inch back, nothing more than that. Next token is mine, and it's going to be on this heavy gunner here. First action is going to be to shoot at this Death Dancer here. Now I have 4 shots. I'll be hitting on 3s normally, down to 5s because of the cover, but I am within range and I haven't moved yet. And because it's a heavy gunner, I will re-roll 1s on this lot. Okay, so I have hit twice. So my opponent gets 2 armor rolls at -1, so they're looking at 6s to save, of which they get 1. So the one that goes through, it's a 50-50 if it does double damage. It does a single wound, so my opponent only takes 1 hit from that. With my second action, seeing how well the first one went, I am going to shoot again. However, this time, because I've already performed a shoot action, it's going to go down to 6s, and 1s are not going to be re-rollable. So I've got 1 hit there, which my opponent can ignore on an armor roll, looking for a 6, which they don't get. Let's see what this one does. Ooh, it does do the double damage, and so not only does it do the double damage, which means it does 2, my opponent has only got 5 strikes on that model, so that will remove that model from play. And because they've already had a token, the token goes with them. My next action, or next token, is going to be this Jet Trooper here, is going to move back like this. Actually, we're going to move them all the way back to here. And we're still within 6 inches, and they are now going to fire at this phase shifter over here. Now, because of me starting on 3s, I've moved, and I was started within 1 inch of an enemy model, but the pistols have a +1 bonus, and there's a +1 bonus. Oh, no, hang on. I've moved myself away out of the 4-inch bonus, so I'm actually hitting on 4s here. So I have 2 pistols firing twice each. There you go. See, those would have been 2 hits if I didn't be dopey and move away. My opponent now gets 2 armor rolls, looking for 6s. Ooh, and unfortunately that is the last 2 wounds to their phase shifter, and they are removed. Next token is mine. Going to give it to this model here, and I'm actually going to use a double move, which would be 10 inches, and that's going to get them to there. Next one, mine again, is going to be a double move from this model, and it is going to get them up to there, like so. Last token for me, oddly enough, the last one actually in there is my opponent's. This comms operator is going to move, so they're going to move around like that. Then they're going to take 3 shots with their carbine at this phase shifter here who is in the open. However, they would be hitting on 3s normally. My model has moved or performed a move action, so they're going to be at -1. So they're actually looking at 4s to hit here. So I get 1 hit. My opponent gets an armor save or an armor roll, which will be on a 6 to ignore. Ooh, they do. So that does nothing. And my opponent is the last one to activate, and it's going to be this model here, which they have said they just want to move to there, which they can do. And then put the token next to them. So as we can see, that is the end of turn 2. This is a 5-turn game, so what we're going to do is we're going to pop over into turn 3 and start again with the token handing out. We will also need to look at rolling for how determination is done in this game, because my opponent has now lost enough models that they can be affected by it. Beginning of turn 3, my first thing my opponent needs to do is make a determination roll. Now, as we can see over here on the edge, they have 3 models that are out, so they're going to roll a dice and see what they get. Ooh, unfortunately they have failed their determination. Now what that means is I'm going to just mark the group so we know that it's failed. It means that my opponent is an additional -1 to their accuracy, and when they make their attacks in combat, they're going to be a -1 to their dice rolls as well for this turn. First token out the bag was mine, so I'm going to activate this model here, this jet trooper. They're going to move to here so that they can get within range of the objective, and then they're going to shoot down into this model here, which is my opponent's leader. So I have 4 shots. They will be -1 for moving, +1 for being pistols, and +1 for being so close range anyway. So I'm going to be hitting on 2s. I get to re-roll this one. So that is 4, which my opponent now needs to roll armor for. They are at -1, so they'll be on 6s. Ooh, okay, they take 2, but that still leaves them with a wound left, because or strike left, because those models have 6 strikes each. Next, this model here is going to activate. They're going to move 3 inches to here, and then inch to here, and they're going to drop down like so. And they are going to have to move a little bit closer to be in range of the objective. But it does also mean they're going to get 4 shots hitting on 2s into the leader again. Rerolling 1s because it's targeting the enemy's leader. Okay, so my opponent now has to make 3 6s to keep this model alive, because they are on 1 strike remaining. Well, it was only 3, but unfortunately they haven't rolled any at all there, so we're just going to remove that model. Next token is to my opponent, so they're going to activate this model here, who is going to rush around like so and attack. So this here is my opponent's duelist. They have 4 attacks. Now they'd be going on 3s normally, but unfortunately because they have failed their determination, they'll be getting their attacks to hit on 4s. So my opponent's going to roll, see what they get. So that's 2, which are at -1. So I'm looking at 5s and 6s here. I pass 1, but do I fall? I don't, I'm just okay. So I take a wound. Now I get to attack back. However, I would only be hitting on 5s and 6s because of my opponent's special rule for the duelist. Neither of which hit back, so that's it for those attacks. So next token goes to my opponent again, who's going to activate their Death Dancer, and they are going to run around here and charge, well, run and move into combat with this model. And now that they're there, they're going to make their attacks. So we've got 5 attacks, hitting on 4s because they have failed their determination, but they'll get to re-roll 1 fail. So my opponent gets to re-roll one of those that has failed, so they'll roll the 2. That's 3 at -1, so I'm looking at 5s and 6s here. I pass 1, but I do fail 2, so I suffer 2 wounds. My attacks back will be hitting on 4s with the 2 of them, which both hit, so my opponent is looking at armor 5 or 6 to survive. So they pass 1, fail 1, so my opponent takes 1 wound, like so. So my opponent is going to activate this model here, and is going to move them to this doorway here, and that's it. So they're just going to pop the counter next to them. Next token is mine, so this model here is going to go double move. So it's 8 inches, and it's going to get them to there. As my opponent has the next token, they're going to activate this model, and they're just going to sort of spin them around a bit and put them like so. Next one for me, this model here is going to use their 5 inches to fall back and around like so, and then is going to shoot their 3 shots from their carbine into this model here. Now they will be getting 3s normally. They have moved, and I did start my actions in base or within an inch of an enemy model, but they are within 4 inches of me, so I'm going to be hitting on 4s. So I get 2 hits. My opponent is looking at 6s in this case to negate them because they're armor roll. And they negate 1 of them, so it puts them down to, I think, 1 strike remaining with that model. Next action is mine, and it's going to be this model here is going to move up to this ladder, climb up and over it, and then it's going to just be able to drop down on the other side for that. Both of their actions using this ladder here. Now, unfortunately, because of the Army Special rule for the Zeta Mining Corporation, I would really like to shoot this model. But I can't because there are currently more models in range of the objective than there are my own, so I have to use my move to try and get in range, which means I'm going to skirt through the middle there, and then end up over here, rather than doing what I wanted to. With that, my opponent's last token for them has come out the pot, and they're going to move this assassin, who's going to run along, up, and like so, to get into combat with my model here. Gets 4 attacks. However, for each one they roll here that's a 6, it's an additional -1 to the armor value, which means that they could be making me into an armor 6 for each 6 they roll. Okay, so they only get 1 hit, but it is at -2, which I promptly fail. My 2 attacks back, which will be on 4s. I get 2 hits back on them, but they ignore them on 5s and 6s. So they ignore 1. So here, unfortunately, because of their failed exchange earlier, or failed determination, it meant that we've actually had a bit of a one-on-one scenario here. With the last token out the pot for turn 3, this model here is going to rush along like so, and go and stand here so we can try and get closer to the central objective. So with that, we have actually come to the end of the turn, which will be the end of turn 3. We're going to just gather up the tokens again and come back to you. So now here we are at the start of turn 4. There's only 2 more turns to go, but my opponent does have to roll for their determination, and with their leader being out, it is 2 dice now, picking the lowest. Unfortunately, that's a 1, so they keep that failed determination. First for me is going to be this model here, and I'm going to jump over for 3, move up a little bit for 2, and then shoot at this model here. So because even though I've moved, which would be a -1, it will negate that by being within 4 inches when I shoot. So I'm looking at 3 shots, hitting on 3s. 2 hits. My opponent needs a double 6 here to survive. Ooh, unfortunately no, so that is that model removed. With the next token, which has come up as mine, I'm actually going to double move this guy, who is going to go and hide right in there. Next token is for myself, so I'm going to activate this model here, who's going to move up a little bit, and is going to open fire on this model. Now, again, it will be a case of they have moved, but then that's cancelled out by being within 4 inches. There's no cover, so it's just 3s to hit. So it's 2 hits. My opponent is looking at 6s to save, so they don't get either. So this model will take 2 wounds, like so. My opponent's token is going to go onto this assassin here. Now, the assassin has 4 attacks, looking at 4s in this case because they failed their determination. Ooh, so they've got 2, which are at -2 because -1 for the combat knife and -1 for rolling sixes, and one at -1. So the one that's at -1, I fail, and the ones at -2, I also fail. So I've actually taken 3 wounds in total on that model. And then my 2 attacks back. I hit once, so my opponent is looking at 1 save of a 5 or 6, which they don't make. My opponent has decided they are going to actually attack again, which is entirely understandable. Looking at, so 2 there. So I've got to pass 2 saves, or I believe my leader is removed. These are only at -1 for the combat knife. I do fail both of them, so I actually do lose my leader and a token out the bag for him. So my opponent has decided to activate this model, and they're going to do 1 set of attacks first, which will be 4 dice. Looking at 4s. So that is 3, which I will roll my armor for. It's going to be 5s against this because it's -1 for the combat knife. Okay, I pass all of them. I'm sure my opponent loves me for that. And I am going to attack that with my 2 attacks, which don't get any hits at all. So with that, my opponent is actually going to attack again and just do the same thing again. So they're looking at 4 attacks. This time 2 go through. These don't have any additional negatives apart from the -1 for the combat knife. However, I don't pass either of them this time, and I don't fall, but I am on 1 wound remaining. We completely forgot. I do actually get some attacks back. These will be on 5s and 6s because the duelist, so my opponent gets 1 armor, which they promptly pass, so it was waste anyway. My opponent has decided with their activation they are going to move out like so and attack their duelist into my ex-soldier, like that. Looking at 4 attacks, hitting on 4s. Okay, so they have 1 hit in total. Unfortunately, all those 3s would have been hits if it wasn't for the determination. And I have failed, so I do take a wound, but I get to attack back with 2, both of which hit. My opponent's looking at 5s and 6s, which they get 1 of, so they take a wound, and I take a wound. Next token is for me, and I'm going to use this model here, who is going to go back and around to here, and then is going to drop down like that, because unfortunately there's nowhere really else to put him at this point. Next token again goes to me, and this model here is going to move back like this and then open fire on this duelist. The only thing is, so I would start hitting on 3s, +1 for the pistol takes me to 2s. However, I have moved. I started within an inch of an enemy. I have actually been reduced to less than half strikes. However, because I'm within 4 inches, it goes back again. So it's actually going to be 4s to hit in this case. So I'm looking at 4 shots, 2 pistols firing twice, hitting on 4s. Okay. Unfortunately for my opponent, I am within 8 inches of the objective, so I do get to re-roll these. However, saying that, I take it up to being 2 hits instead of 1. My opponent gets 6s to ignore, which they do, so they only take 1 damage in this case. However, they are within range of a ledge, so they're going to have to roll to see if they fall or not. 1 dice. And they fall, so unfortunately it's 3 inches to the nearest. So they're going to have to roll 3 dice, and for each 3+ they get, it is a strike. Ooh, and that means they fall and suffer 3 strikes and take themselves out of the game. With the last token for my side in this turn, I'm going to assign it to this model, the only one I've got left. And they're going to do a double move, because they get to go 10 and then 10 again. And that will be enough to bring them to here. With my opponent's last token, they're actually going to do what I thought they would, which is flip around there and attack into my jet trooper. So they have 4 attacks with the assassin, looking for 4s. Okay, so that's 2 at -1, so I'm looking at 5s to save, 5s and 6s. I don't get either, so I am down another 2 wounds, which will put me on to... Yep, they'll put me on to 5 in total, so I have 1 remaining. My attack's back. Both hit, so my opponent's looking at 5s and 6s, which they make neither of, so they take 2 back in retaliation. With that, we actually come to the end of the turn, so we're just going to gather up the counters and we will go into turn 5, which is the final turn. So with that, we have come into the start of turn 5, which is the final turn in these games. First of all, my opponent is going to have to roll for determination. Now, in this game, there is actually a system that if you roll a 6, then irrelevant how many models you've lost, you always pass determination. But as my opponent has lost their leader, it will need to be a double 6. They get 1, but unfortunately they needed both. So they have failed for this one. But in my case, I also have 2 models out, one of which is my leader, so it's rolling 2, picking the worst. I didn't roll a 1, so I'm okay for this turn. First token from myself is going to go on this jet trooper, who is going to move like that and then open fire onto that model with their second action. Now in this case, it's going to be 4 shots. I would be hitting on 3s, going up to 2s and then 1s in a way for being both +1 for the pistol and +1 for short range. However, I am going to be -1 for moving and -1 for being at so many wounds, so I actually go back to 3s. So I hit 3 times. My opponent is looking at 6s to save because the energy pistol is -1. They don't save any of them, and unfortunately that model only has 5 strikes, so with those 2 they are removed. Next is again for me, this model here is going to move double and just go and stand over there. So we just move the bridge out the way here for a second because I'm about to activate this model with the token I got. They're going to hop up, run along here, hop down and across so that they're no longer in base contact with this model, and then they're going to shoot at them. So we would be 3s with the pistol accuracy in within 4 inches, would take it down to 1s. However, we go back up with the -1 for more than half damage taken, having already moved, and starting within range of an enemy. So that 1, 2, 3, 4, I need 4s to hit in this case. So I have 4 dice. I hit with 3 of them, so my opponent is looking at 3 armor rolls, 6s to save. And unfortunately, again, that is 3 down, 3 into them. They had 2 wounds already, so they are removed. With the next token, this model here is going to move back just enough to be out of range, and then he's going to fire 3 shots into that duelist. So they would be 3s normally. They've moved and they started within combat range, so they go back to 5s, go to 4s for being within 4 inches. So we'll see what happens. In this case, no hits, but I do get to re-roll this 1 because of being within range of the objective. So it is a hit, so my opponent needs 1 armor roll, which they fail, but they've only lost... Oh, no. I did not realise that model was already on 3 wounds. That would be the 4th wound. That's a duelist. They only have 4 wounds, so unfortunately that would be them removed. And with that, we have come to the end of this first game of Death Among the Stars. As you can see, it has been a win for the Zeta Mining Corporation, which if you read the lore in the rulebook, you'll realise that's sadly probably inevitable in some ways. But anyway, enough about that. Let's do the wrap up and we will discuss over the game that we just played. And that is it. We have come to the end of the game. As we saw there, the Zeta Mining Corporation definitely getting quite a majority win, unfortunately. But that is Death Among the Stars. Now, as it currently stands, the rules are still in beta testing and still have a little bit of touching up to do here and there. So this gives you a general overview and idea of what the game is like, but we will be changing a couple of things here and there before the final rules release. Of course we will. We still have testing. We're also just in sort of the standard of getting the art done, getting the backgrounds done, just to make the rulebook look nice and stand out a little bit for when it is finally released. In terms of this game, we are hoping to have it released certainly by the end of the year. We're not 100% sure. Original plan was for September, but that has changed. But as we can see, that is Death Among the Stars. That's how the game plays out. It's a sci-fi skirmish game with alternative activation, model markers and various other factors. If it's something you're interested in, please follow our page. If you would like to see our other games, we do have Age of Alchemy, which is available on our Patreon based on a series of small monthly fees paid into it to get access to the rules, updates and various other things. We'll be doing the same here with Death Among the Stars. So all that remains to say is a thank you very much for taking the time out to watch this video, see if you're interested in the new game. Sorry it was a little bit one-sided, but we'll look into that and see if there's anything we do really need to change in the rules. But from me and my opponent behind the camera, it's thank you very much for watching, and we will see you in the next battle report.